If you're looking for synth gear community vibes with a bunch of brains and knowledge, hit up my Discord. There's an invite link in the description of this video. Would love to have you there. And talking about teenage engineering, so what an interesting company, right? Like they're a synth company, but not really, not actually. They're predominantly more of a design company. I've done almost 90 related videos of teenage engineering products on this channel alone. Products like all of the pocket operators, the OP1, the OPZ, the OB4, the TX6, EP133. And the question is like, am I done with their products? Well, I sold most of them. Currently, I'm left with the OP1 field, which I don't think I'll ever sell. Same with the OB4 as well as the EP133, which I may or may not get rid of at some point, but we see where they're going with the EP series. They're probably going to release a bunch of other EP units. Teenage Engineering was my introduction into the synth world, and a great introduction, I might add. Just the way that they're able to pull people into a specific industry through their designs, I think that's actually a really positive thing. Like I might not have been here at this point if it wasn't for teenage engineering products. And so I appreciate that. I'm aware of that. And so the question is like, what's the problem? Why am I making this video? Well, kind of off-brand for this channel, but also not off-brand because it's about teenage engineering. A few weeks ago now, CoffeeZilla, who is a YouTuber who focuses specifically on scams, like internet scams. And he recently put out a video on the R1, a handheld AI designed by Teenage Engineering. The way things have turned out, Rabbit has basically become a giant scam. It also seems like they just straight up lied about how it actually works. I'm sure a lot of them were bought upfront just through, marketing and the advertisement of this idea of having like a handheld pocket AI system. I'll be clear upfront, from what I know, Teenage Engineering has no involvement in the actual scam itself. They just designed the product. Teenage Engineering has also had their hands in designing for other companies like Panic. So they designed the Playdate, which is like a tiny handheld gaming console. It's kind of like a throwback to an OG Game Boy, black and white, super cool concept. And Panic is a much smaller company, but they had the same effect of selling super quickly. They were not able to keep up with demand. It took me over 2 years, I think, or almost 2 years to actually receive my Playdate. Teenage Engineering were also apparently working with Kanye on the STEM player, which was released a couple of years ago now. They were like the original designers of that concept, but I don't think, I think it fell through. And this is off of Reddit, so I'm not 100% sure if it's actually true, but I think that it is because you could see through the design that it's very similar to the TX6, which they released a couple of years later, right? So you could see a correlation there. But going back to Rabbit though, it's like the perfect extreme example of purchasing the idea of something rather than the actual thing itself. An idea that was sold through very slick and kind of scuzzy advertisement and marketing, as well as a really strong design. And so that's something I'm going to be sort of threading through this video. So the idea of the product versus what it actually delivers in reality. And I just find that it's really interesting and so on topic that time and time again, Teenage Engineering, a company that's in the synth world, but not really, has had such a huge impact on the entire synth industry, the gear industry, as well as probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of actual synth users. And they seem to be the go-to, or at least one of the go-to companies for this sort of tech minimalist design for companies outside of the synth world. And they truly do have this very real power of getting people to purchase something without really even knowing what it does fully. We saw this happen with one of their most recent synth or gear products, the EP133. It was an absolute explosion on day one. We also saw this happen with the initial release of the OP1, which was a lot more affordable back then than it is today, which I think is why it had such a huge impact. And then close to maybe the next decade, there was a few big YouTubers who latched onto it, and it had this sort of effect for years, which clearly has slowed down because obviously it's been a decade. And also just the price of the unit has I think it's sort of jaded people a little bit. And I find this to be a problem within the dawless community as well. The notion of gas gear acquisition syndrome, I've actually done a fully dedicated version to this topic. So here is that video if you're interested. I feel like the idea of gas was exposed in a very grandiose way outside of the synth industry with Rabbit, which was advertised as an AI tool designed to make everyone's life easier. But in reality, it actually turned out that sticking to your iPhone was just a lot more efficient than purchasing a secondary unit as an AI tool. In the bigger picture of the synth world altogether, this new slickness and I want that effect, I guess we could call it, we're seeing that now from many companies inside the gear space. How much of this is us just being misled by like a new shiny product when the gear that we actually already have does the job just as well, or maybe even in some cases better than that new shiny product? I'm at the point now for my goals as an artist, producer, creator, whatever you want to call me, who's sort of like right down the middle, halfway in between purchasing a lot of the gear that I feature on my channel and then being given gear in exchange for content. So it's like, I'm not the go-to guy for day one content, but I have done some day one content stuff. Having done this for a few years now, I'm really just starting to see through it all. And maybe that's just experience. Maybe that's something that all of us have to go through to understand what's actually worth buying versus what is a marketing ploy that may not actually deliver on what they're suggesting that a product can actually do. I've realized that as humans, we have like a weak spot. We're kind of dumb in this way. I include myself in this category. We might not actually see the reality of the situation when we're impulse buying a piece of gear because it is exciting. I, along with a bunch of my YouTube creator colleagues, it's no secret, we're contributing to this endless announcement of new shiny gear, the new best thing. And at the same time, as someone who's, like I said, down the middle of receiving new gear sometimes and also buying new gear, I'm still rushing to purchase certain units. Like the Digitac 2 was one that I recently rushed to buy. No regrets, I'm glad that I did buy it, but just that idea of rushing to buy a piece of gear to almost essentially like do an ad for that piece of gear. And it goes a little bit deeper than that even, because I'm using like a lifetime of musical experience to feature a new product that I bought on a platform that I've been, spending the past 5 years building. I almost feel like I'm exposing myself right now, but the real question is, when does this all become a problem? If you're someone who has some extra money and you buy, a sampler, a groove box, a couple synths, and you're having fun using them all. And by the way, that's the number one goal, is to have fun. To me though, when it becomes a problem is just like the overlap of gear. So if let's say you own 4 groove boxes or 5 samplers and you're looking at the next best sampler or groove box, that's, to me, there's like an addictive element to that. At that point, I think it's safe to say that you're buying into the idea of this new sampler. Maybe you think that it's gonna make your music better or whatever it might be. And by the way, it's not. At that point, it's real. Like you're pretty much just getting sucked into the content cycle that, like I said, I'm a part of this cycle. Sometimes even just like the rush of buying a piece of gear can be more exciting than actually hunkering down, learning that piece of gear, learning to make music with that piece of gear. In the end, ultimately, it really depends on what your goal is. Is it more of a hobby? Is it just to have fun? Are you someone who would like to maybe compose and release music? Which one are you? Circling back around to Teenage Engineering, again, I feel like they're the perfect company to get this point across. Because to me, it's clear that they are the masters of selling the idea of a product rather than the actual product itself, through their designs, which truly are pieces of art. After seeing that CoffeeZilla Rabbit video, things just really clicked for me in that respect. Another reality that I'm sure you're already aware of, this is a pretty expensive hobby. Chances are that regardless, you're gonna want to spend some time and money and experiment with, several pieces of gear to find out what's right for you. How cool and minimalist a piece of gear looks is not going to improve your skills as a musician. It doesn't even necessarily mean you're gonna have more fun with that piece of gear. It's just another unit you're gonna have to learn. And it's also not gonna replace the consistent time and practice that you need to put into an instrument if you want to progress using it. And this is coming from someone who believes that aesthetics do matter. But some companies, and I'm sorry to say this, Teenage Engineering is on this list, at least with some of their products. I believe that they put design over the actual functionality and quality of the product. And I find that whether it's intentional or not, they really play into that dumb impulsive part that gives into buying an idea of something, and not the actual reality of the thing itself. That's today's video. Hopefully it was informative to you in some way. Thank you guys so much for being here. I have a Discord. I also have a Patreon if you want to give some extra support. Do all the things like subscribe, leave a comment if you have any questions or comments, and I'll see you soon.